morning, Dr. James.
Good morning.
Could you give the jury your full name and place of residence?
Thomas Themis James.
And you are a medical doctor?
Yes.
And have you been a medical doctor in Trumbull County?
Yes.
Do we want to count the years?
I got my license in 1970. I went into practice in 1974.
And I know that you're busy as a general practitioner?
Internal medicine.
In internal medicine. Okay. Now, there came a time that you decided to take up the position of Trumbull County Coroner.
Yes.
And last year, in 2018, our coroner passed away.
Yes.
And tell the jury exactly what you did at that point.
Well, I was deputy coroner starting in January without any work to do. And when Humphrey Germanek suddenly died, I was sworn in within the next day or two as coroner. And
Dr. Germanek had a special status in the community, did he not?
He did. He was very well respected, very knowledgeable.
And what type of background medically did he have?
Well, he was a board-certified forensic pathologist, and he had experience in Washington, D.C.
And you briefly tell the jury your background medically.
Well, I'm an internal medicine doctor, went into practice in 1974. I held positions. I was chief of medicine for 6 years. I was president of the medical staff at Trumbull Memorial for 5 terms. I was on the board of Trumbull Memorial Hospital and was president of that board for a while. And when Trumbull merged with Northside and formed Forum Health, I became president of Forum's board for 3 years.
And you went to which medical school?
Ohio State.
And previously to that, what college did you go?
Ohio State.
Okay. And as the appointed coroner last year, would you describe the duties that you have now as our Trumbull County coroner?
Now, coroner's duties are to come up and by law, the most accurate determination of cause of death and the manner of death.
And by law, you have to determine cause of death?
Yes.
And that's known as a coroner's verdict?
Yes.
And you do that now?
I do that.
And you also at times may issue a certificate of death?
Yes.
And that's regular in your practice?
Yes.
Okay. Now, replacing Dr. Germanek, since he is dead, would mean in a case he was handling prior to you taking office, we would need a substitute witness.
Yes.
And in your office, do you regularly keep records of prior coroners and also records of deputies that perform functions that are required?
Yes, we do.
And if there is an autopsy, you would have autopsy records.
Yes.
And previously we talked, and I asked you to review some records.
Yes.
I want to show you States Exhibit 60. Can you identify it?
Yes, this is the death certificate of Carl Hoerig, signed by Ted Sabosley, who was a coroner at that time.
And is he also deceased?
He's also deceased.
So we're dealing with 2007, we're going on 12 years later.
Yeah.
So you're the person in charge, and that is a record from your office, publicly kept. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it determined the cause of death, and then I want you to look at a package of documents in State's Exhibit 61 and tell me if you can identify the coroner's verdict and the attached pathology report and toxicology report.
Yes.
And would you tell the jury what those documents are?
The results of those documents?
Yeah. What are the documents?
Oh, the documents, the coroner's certificate is in there. The pathology report is in there.
That is the report that you have in your custody
Yes.
of Dr. Germany, correct?
Yes.
And how many pages?
Oh, my gosh.
I think there's 32.
I will take your word for it.
Okay. And those documents are in the custody of the prosecutor's office as a result of this investigation.
Yes.
And it's the determination at that time by Dr. Sabazli that this is a homicide as a result of 3 gunshot wounds. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any further?
Yeah.
All right. Cross?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Good morning, Your Honor. How are
Morning.
you doing? How are you doing?
I am good.
Good. So, as part of your job as coroner for the county, are you responsible for autopsies and autopsy reports?
I'm responsible to get them done by somebody who does them. I don't do autopsies.
Okay. Who currently does the autopsies for Trumbull County?
We send many of them to Cleveland.
Okay.
We have a Dr. Bartholow from Mahoning County does some, and we have a Dr. Keep also from near Cleveland who does some.
Okay. As part of the exhibit 61 there,
Yes.
is there an autopsy report in there?
Yes.
I believe it's 11 pages long,
It's long, yes.
and that was prepared by Dr. Germanic.
Yes.
And in your experience, he did autopsies himself.
He did do autopsies.
Okay, and that's because he was a forensic pathologist?
He is board certified forensic pathologist.
Have you reviewed that autopsy report?
I did.
In that autopsy report, does he make any findings as to what order the gunshots were fired?
I did not see an order of the gunshots.
Okay. Did he make any findings as to the position of the victim, whether he was sitting, standing, or where he may have been sitting?
I don't remember seeing any reference to position.
Okay. In fact, Dr. Germanic's report simply states he was shot, the angle of the bullets, and the effect of the bullets, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. And to your knowledge, did Dr. Germanic go to the scene of the crime?
I don't know whether he did or not.
Okay. But that would be in his records?
It should.
And prior to becoming coroner, did you work in the Trumbull County Coroner's Office?
No, I did not.
Okay. If I may have just a moment, Your Honor. Doctor, you're aware a second autopsy report was prepared in this case?
The second autopsy?
Yes.
No, I'm not aware.
Okay. So your office didn't request a second report?
Not that I know of.
Okay. So you had no say in requesting a second report?
No.
Okay. And you don't know of any reports that differ from Dr. Germanic?
No.
Just one question. Dr. Germany.
I'm finished, Your Honor.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Germanic died in April of 2018.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
No other questions?
All right, any further, Mr. Cornell?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you may step down, thank you. We'll call the next witness.
Dr. Joseph Felo
solemnly swear the testimony about you will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I will.
Sign this next to my court reporter, have your name.
Hi,
Before we start, can I get your full name, please?
Joseph Felo, F as Frank, E-L-O, my D-O. You're welcome.
Good morning, Dr. Felo.
Good morning.
Would you tell the jury your name and occupation and where your occupation is currently?
My name is Joseph Felo. I am a forensic pathologist and the Chief Deputy Medical Examiner for Cuyahoga County in Cleveland, Ohio.
And how long have you held that position?
I have been a forensic pathologist for 21 and a half years. I have been the Chief Deputy Medical Examiner for almost 3 full years. And prior to that, I was the Chief Deputy Coroner when we were a coroner's office for 4 years as well.
And have you handled homicides in Trumbull County previously?
Yes, I have.
And have you served as a substitute witness when a doctor or expert is unavailable?
Yes, I have.
And would you give your background to the jury from your education to college to certification and explain your credentials, please?
Certainly. I received my Bachelor of Science degree from St. Lawrence University in Canton, New York in 1988. In 1992, I received my osteopathic medical degree from the University of Health Sciences in Kansas City, Missouri. Between 1992 and 1993, I completed an osteopathic internship at Wilson Memorial Hospital in Johnson City, New York. Between 1993 and 1997, I completed my anatomic pathology and clinical pathology residency at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation in Cleveland, Ohio. And between 1997 and 1998, I completed a forensic pathology fellowship at the Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office, also in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm board certified in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology. I'm licensed by the state of Ohio to practice medicine, and as of yesterday, I've completed 3,894 autopsies.
How many times have you testified in Ohio as an expert witness?
In Ohio, 182 times.
And have you testified in other states?
Yes, I have.
And explain what a forensic pathologist does above and beyond what a pathologist does.
A pathologist is a doctor that essentially studies body fluids and tissues in order to determine a diagnosis. So, for example, if you were to have a biopsy or your appendix taken out, that would go to a pathologist. They would examine that tissue and then render a diagnosis, and then the doctor who took off that lesion would tell you what that diagnosis is. Similarly, that's what an anatomic pathologist does. A clinical pathologist deals with the laboratory, so any of your blood work, throat cultures, urinalysis, all of that goes to a clinical pathologist to render a diagnosis. I'm board certified, and that's my basic training in both of those types of pathology. Forensic pathology is a subset of anatomic pathology, which is the tissue pathology, and my primary responsibility is to apply the science of medicine with issues that have legal ramifications and issues. So I am trained and skilled at looking at mostly dead people, dead patients. I have rendered opinions on living patients as well, but the vast majority of my patients are dead. And when I formulate why they died and how they died, that's the cause of death and the manner of death. I'm also skilled in interpreting positions of the body, what was happening, how the dying process went as well. That's the forensic side of things.
Your Honor, I would wish to allow defense counsel to wish to require us to his credentials.
Any questions regarding expertise?
Yes, Your Honor.
Doctor, I'm going to show you Defendant's Exhibit G1. Do you know what that is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, what is that?
This is my curriculum vitae, which is a summary of my professional background, and this is as of July 31st of 2017.
Okay. And you're certified as a forensic pathologist.
Yes.
And all the training listed on there goes to your certification as a forensic pathologist.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any training in crime scene reconstruction?
No, I don't.
Do you have any training in any sort of reconstruction?
No.
Do you have any training in crime scene analysis?
Not anything specific. It's on-the-job training.
Okay. Have you ever taught any courses on crime scene analysis or crime scene understanding?
Yes, I have.
And when were those?
I don't recall specifically. Let me see when they're for the presentations. One of my specialties is pediatric pathology, and so I have talked about the scene reconstruction and analysis in 2007 and in 2011.
Okay. And that was in pediatric pathology?
Yes.
Okay. But you don't have any formal training or classroom sessions in that?
No, but as I'm not finished looking at my other terms. I've given a talk. I'm looking to see where specifically it is specifically to the death investigation system in Cuyahoga County. And that was done in 2009 and 2013.
And have you ever been certified in any court in Ohio as an expert in crime scene reconstruction, crime scene analysis?
No.
No questions? Okay, very much.
Thank you.
Doctor will be an expert in forensic pathology.
Thank you.
You can proceed.
When you have testified, and I think you said it 180 times, regarding forensic pathology throughout Ohio, are you dealing with opinions regarding the cause and manner of death?
Yes, I am.
And June of this year, did the Trumbull County Prosecutor's Office, and I should say last year, in 2018, call you asking you to review records, photographs regarding the death of Claudia Hoerig that took place on March 12, 2007?
Yes.
And did you at that time know Dr. Humphrey German?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell us what relationship you had with Dr. German?
Dr. Germanick is a friend and a former colleague of mine who has since passed away. And I've known him for probably 15 to 20 years prior to his death. At one time, he was the forensic pathologist for Trumbull County, and I would review some of his cases, and he would review some of my cases. We also lectured at various times. He would come and support a lecture series that I have, and he would come and give lectures for those. There's only about 450 to 500 forensic pathologists in the United States. I am very active in the National Association of Medical Examiners, which is the national professional group for forensic pathologists, as was Dr. Germanick. So I saw him at least 2 times a year for our national meetings. So I'm very familiar with Dr. Germanick.
And so you went to a lot of the same seminars and educational events in your discipline?
Yes.
Now, when you agreed to do this case as a substitute witness, you were in need of the information regarding this case, including a variety of documents that eventually was submitted by myself, my office, because you were retained to give an opinion because of his death.
Yes.
And therefore, in our phone call, you wanted to have certain things. Is that correct?
Is he testifying?
Please avoid leading, obviously.
I'm just trying to lead up to the documents.
Okay. I cautioned him, we're going to proceed.
Yeah. You did receive items, is that correct?
I did.
Would you tell the jury what you received?
I received 9 specific documentations and items, and I have them listed in a report that I authored, dated August 17th of 2018.
And I'm going to hand you that report. You have a copy. 87. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
And that is your report?
It is. And
Signed
it's
by
actually-
you?
Well, it's signed as my draft report.
Okay.
I have a signed report as well.
Yeah.
But State's Exhibit 87 is...
It's exactly the same.
It is, yes.
And it's dated August 17th?
Yes, of 2018.
And did you receive photographs?
I did.
Did you receive other documents? I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit 61.
State's Exhibit 61 is the coroner's verdict, as well as the autopsy report, the toxicology laboratory report, and all these are from the Trumbull County Coroner's Office regarding the death of Mr. Hoerig, and I did receive these documents to review.
And you also had in your possession State's Exhibit 60. Tell me if I'm correct.
State's Exhibit 60 is the death certificate for Carl D. Hoerig, and I did indeed review this document.
Did you also receive video transcript of Claudia Hoerig's statement along with summaries of William Bolden of the U.S. Marshal Service
Yes,
and the Federal Bureau of Investigation Special Agent Anthony Sano?
Yes, I did.
And the photographs included exterior and interior photographs of 64 West 9th Street, Newton Falls, Ohio?
Yes, I reviewed those.
And did you receive photographs of the autopsy at the Trumbull County morgue?
Yes, I did.
And did you at one point receive a shirt that was worn by Mr. Hoerig?
I looked at it, yes.
And that was brought to you at the coroner's office in Cleveland, or the medical examiner's office?
Yes, it was delivered to my office in Cleveland, and I examined it and returned it back to the gentleman who had brought it to me to look at.
Now, when you review the work product from investigators, and in this particular case, Dr. Germany, you decide whether or not you have enough information to render opinions as to cause and manner of death.
Yes, I do.
And in this particular case, did you feel from all the materials submitted to you that you had sufficient information to make a report and render an opinion, or
Yes.
opinions?
Yes, both.
And would you, in your own way, go through your findings and conclusions. Now, prior to that, when you as a medical examiner, what's the standard that you operate in order to make an opinion?
I operate at a standard called reasonable degree of medical certainty, and that's my standard of care.
And when you rendered opinions in Ohio throughout the 180 or so, that is the basis for you to give these opinions?
That's correct, yes.
From your background and having sufficient information?
Yes.
And would you go through your conclusions?
Certainly. Mr. Hoerig had essentially 3 gunshot wounds that went either into his body or through his body. When they go into the body, that's called a penetrating gunshot wound, and he has 2 of those. Both of them are in his right back. When they go through the body, that's called a perforating gunshot wound, and he has one of those that goes through his head. Starting first with the penetrating gunshot wounds, and Dr. Germanick labeled them as gunshot wounds A, B, and C, essentially working upwards. So A is the lowest one towards the feet, B is in the middle, and C is the wound that's closest to the top of the head. Gunshot wound A is a penetrating gunshot wound, and it enters the right upper back, and it goes from his back towards his front and upwards, essentially into the right shoulder. So this is a very steep angle from where it enters over the scapula, which is the shoulder blade, and ends in the right shoulder.
And I do have photograph 62. Would that be helpful?
Certainly.
And you've looked at these previously, and
Yes, I have.
can you identify 62?
State's Exhibit 62 is an autopsy photograph of Mr. Hoerig, and it is of his back. Visible within the photograph is 2 wounds. Both of those are entrance gunshot wounds. And there's a black marker that has one listed as A and one listed as B. And as I stated, A is lowered down towards the armpit area, and B is closer to the spine.
Your Honor, we'd like to publish.
May?
When would you show that and explain it to the jury, please?
He's going to have to move the camera. This is State's Exhibit 62, and 62 demonstrates 2 penetrating gunshot wounds. Towards the lower portion of the screen is wound A, and that is the one that essentially goes up to his right shoulder, very steeply, not deep within the skin. Gunshot wound letter B is closer to his neck, closer to the spine, and this wound enters his back, and it goes through many ribs on the right side, and then it travels downwards and towards the left and ends near his left nipple. That bullet goes through his right lung, it goes through major blood vessels and the breathing tube of the right lung, and it also goes through the aorta, which is the major artery in the body, finally coming to a rest just beneath the skin near his left nipple. When I look at these wounds, and when Dr. Germanick describes these wounds, what the forensic pathologist is also looking is where the location is, but what is present and what is not present around those wounds. And specifically, when an entrance gunshot wound is identified, doctors, forensic pathologists will look to see if there's any fouling or stippling, and that is burnt gunpowder, comes out as gun smoke, that will be soot. And stipple wounds are unburnt gunpowder that gets embedded within the skin around the entrance wound. Those are important to help determine range of fire, meaning how close the gun is to the body surface that the bullet goes into. In this case, The bullets both went through shirt material, so examination of the shirt is more specific for range of fire. What I can tell is that these are not contact gunshot wounds, meaning the gun was not pressed up against his back because none of that black powder is around the wound or underneath the wound. So those are the two wounds on his back that both are retained and recovered by Dr. Germanek, and he has photographs of those as well.
And here's another view in State's Exhibit 63.
State's Exhibit 63 is going to be a close-up of the same wounds that I just described. So different angle, just showing that gunshot wound A, which is the wound that goes up to the right shoulder. This is a non-lethal wound. It hurts, but it doesn't cause him to die. But it'll make his shoulder blade and his arm, because it breaks both of those bones, unable to move.
Would he be incapacitated with such a shot?
Yes, from the pain and being hit with that bullet, yes.
And the other wound,
which is B, is the wound that goes essentially in the center of the image. This wound, this bullet goes actually towards his left and downward, traveling through his lung and blood vessels, coming to a rest just near the left nipple.
and I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 64.
State's Exhibit 64 is a close-up of gunshot wound A, and it has a very circular appearance because the bullet is going through fast. It causes a sharp circular hole. There's a little bit of a discoloration around the rim of that wound, and it's reddish and yellow. That is typical for an entrance wound. That's part of the bullet piercing through the skin. As I stated, there's no black powder around that wound. There's none visible beneath the wound. Therefore, it's not a contact wound.
So A, he was shot in the back.
Absolutely.
B is another photograph. 65.
State's Exhibit 65 is a close-up of gunshot wound B, and this is the bullet that enters his upper middle portion of his right back. And again, it's got a nice circular wound. There is some dark discoloration, but that's part of the decomposition. The tissues underneath, because of the blood that is leaking through that, is going to stain the wound. So it's not, although it's dark, there's no black powder or stipple, which are punctate wounds, around it. So this is, again, a non-contact wound. And this bullet path is a potentially lethal wound because it travels through his vital structures in his chest, going from his right surface towards his left, from his back surface to the front, and downwards.
And again, B is a shot in the back.
Yes, it is.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 66.
State's Exhibit 66 is the left chest of Mr. Hoerig, and located in the center of the State's Exhibit 66, there's a black letter B. That is where the bullet is recovered. So it is just above and towards the midline of his left chest. The nipple is in the lower left image for orientation. If you notice, there is some reddish and purple discoloration. That is a process called livor mortis. And livor, L-I-V-O-R, mortis, is when we die, the blood is going to settle towards gravity. And it's going to give a purplish red color because the blood has settled towards that area. So he died on his chest, on his belly, and stayed there until he was found. And that's why there's that purplish red color. That is not bruising. That is a phenomenon that happens when we die. The areas that don't have that, specifically around his chest, those were in contact with the floor, a firm surface, because it prevented the blood to leak into that area there.
Now, 2 questions. Is the condition that you see with the livor mortis consistent with a person being shot on a Monday and the body being found on Thursday?
Yes, it is.
So they would be on the floor for some period of time.
Yes.
Now, regarding the location of the bullet and the way it was near the left nipple,
Yes.
You indicate that because it didn't come out, that,
Objection?
well, you explain what significance as to where the body was when that shot occurred.
This photograph is taken after Dr. Germanek made a cut in the skin to retrieve the bullet. So what you see just above the letter B is a gray object. That's the bullet. There's somewhat of an elliptical or eye-shaped cut that was made by Dr. Germanek. Between that elliptical wound and where the white placard is, there is a darker red area. That was where the bullet was lodged underneath the skin. So the bullet came very close to breaking the skin, but did not. And the reason why it did not break the skin is because there's a firm object preventing that from breaking the skin. In this case, the floor in which it was found. So he was shot while on the floor in the back, and the bullet entered but did not exit because the floor kept the bullet from exiting his body.
So your opinion is that he's on the floor when that bullet went through his back to that area?
Yes, the letter D wound, yes.
Now, in this particular case, Dr. Germany, having died in April, only issued an autopsy report.
Yes.
And in that autopsy report, does that speak to you through the findings that he gave you?
Yes, it does.
Now, I'm going to hand you what State's Exhibit 67.
State's Exhibit 67 is a photograph of the right side of Mr. Hoerig's head. And what is noted in front of the right ear is a circular hole. That is the entrance gunshot wound, the third entrance gunshot wound, which is letter C. What is noted, again, it's a nice circular hole consistent with an entrance wound. But on the face, you'll notice that there is some red dots and some yellow dots sort of towards the eye and then up in the forehead. Those are what are known as stipple wounds. And stipple wounds are when a handgun is discharged, not only does the bullet come down the muzzle of the gun, but also gunpowder that is unburnt comes out as flakes or powder, and that travels a distance and can get embedded within the skin around where the bullet goes through. That's what stipple wounds are. Not only does the bullet and unburnt gunpowder come out, but also burnt gunpowder comes out. And burnt gunpowder will come out as smoke, and it'll be deposited on the skin as soot. And that is much like soot. You can smear it off or wipe it off. There's none of that present around this entrance wound, nor any other entrance wound for that matter. But the stipple wounds cannot be wiped off because they get embedded within the skin. So that helps determine what the range of fire is, meaning how close the muzzle of the gun is to where the entrance wound in the surface of the skin is.
And do you have an opinion on the range?
Yes, I do.
Would you give the range that shot occurred?
A handgun is going to have stipple wounds be deposited on the skin between 12 inches and 24 inches from the muzzle of the gun to the striking surface. So that means that this gun is between 12 inches and 24 inches away. And I use the 12 inches as the low point, or the closer point, because between near contact and 12 inches, there should be soot deposited around the entrance wound. There is no soot deposited around the entrance wound here. Therefore, the muzzle of the gun is between 1 foot and 2 feet from his face when he gets shot.
And assuming the evidence shows the body was on the bottom of the stairs on the first floor,
Yes.
that would mean the person that shot him would have to be on that floor?
Yes.
Now, and the gun's 12 inches to 24 inches away from him
Correct.
as he's on the floor.
Yes.
And that's C.
That's C. That's the
Entrance wound.
entrance wound to the gunshot wound of his head.
Now, I'm handing you 68. That's a different view showing more of the stipples.
Yes, it is. And so this stage exhibit is showing the, again, the entrance wound, which is close to the hairline, but there's white tabs that are around, indicating the area of the stipple wounds. And of note, there's a straight line that's going across the lower margin. That is because there is an object that was absorbing stipple wounds that did not allow them to be embedded on the face.
Now, you, because of your training background in, I believe, 23 years as a forensic pathologist, can make a lot of conclusions by seeing photographs.
Absolutely.
And in this particular case, you did have Dr. Germany's autopsy report.
I did.
And did he make notations about stippling on his findings?
Yes, they're in the autopsy report.
So it's consistent with his findings.
Yes.
So you indicate that B and C were shots downstairs,
Yes.
from your opinion.
Correct.
Now, 69.
State's Exhibit 69 is the exit wound or partial exit wound of the gunshot wound of his head. And this is located essentially where the top portion of the ear meets the face. And there is an irregular tear, it's red in color, where the left ear meets the skin of the face. There's also some discoloration of the skin. Areas look a little more dull or scraped away with red and yellow colors. That is post-mortem changes, meaning that happened after death. These are not bruises, these are not scrapes that were inflicted while he was alive, but they are a post-mortem phenomenon from the decomposition changes.
Doctor, assume that the evidence established in this case showed that a .357 or even .38 caliber weapon was used with hollow point ammunition. Would it be consistent to have a through and through wound of his temple area from the right to the left when the gun is 12 inches to 24 inches away?
Yes.
And did you see a photograph that showed the bullet that exited flattened in the floor?
Yes.
Again, that's consistent with your conclusion?
Yes, that he received a gunshot C while his left surface of his head is near or on the floor, such that the bullet exited or partially exited and was deposited next to his head.
I'm going to show you 10.
State's Exhibit 10.
I'm sorry, 70. 70.
I don't have my glasses on, so it's...
Tell the jury what that is if you know.
What I have in my hand is State's Exhibit 70.
Yes.
And I have
And
what's on the
71.
State's Exhibit 71. This is an X-ray of Mr. Hoerig, and State's Exhibit 71 shows where the bullets are recovered from his shots to the back. In the upper left, so to interpret this X-ray, imagine you're looking straight at the person. So his left is going to be on our right, and his right is going to be on our left. So in the upper left corner is the humerus, which is the upper arm bone of his right. There's a lot of dark white objects. Those are the fragments of the first gunshot wound that shattered his shoulder blade and his right upper arm bone. What's over towards the right portion of the State's Exhibit, below where it says supine, that is the bullet that is recovered from his left nipple area. And there's several small fragments that sort of trail towards his spine. That's going down the center of the exhibit. Those are pieces of that bullet that were breaking as it's going through bone and soft tissues and such.
And let's go back. I may have missed the order, but we have the skull is 70.
And State's Exhibit 70 is, again, when you look at this, it says left, that's on the right as you're looking. So imagine you're looking at Mr. Hoerig face on, and what's visible here, this is a skull X-ray, and over towards the left, there are a few dark objects. One that is just to the left where it says Portable, there's an E for portable. That is a fragment of the bullet. There's also one directly below that. That's also another small fragment. So most of the bullet exited. Some pieces stayed within the skull for gunshot C.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go on to State's Exhibit 72. And would you tell the jury, if you can identify it, what it means to you?
State's Exhibit 72 are the bullet fragments that were recovered from gunshot wound A. Most of them are jacket, which is the outer metal of a bullet. That large circular part is the majority of the jacket, which again is the outer surface of a bullet. These were recovered from his right shoulder area.
And A and B never exited his body.
Correct.
And that's why you're explaining the projectiles and what they mean to you. 73, please.
State's Exhibit 73 is the projectile that's recovered from the left chest, and it is showing a deformed bullet, and it's deformed as it's going through bone. Bone is hard, so it causes the bullet to fragment and be distorted. So that's why this bullet that's recovered from the left chest is somewhat deformed.
Now, looking at that bullet, what remains, what can you tell the jury as far as its size, as far as you from your experience can say?
Looking at the image, there's no scale in the State's Exhibit 73, so I can't tell what the size is. So when you look at the size of a bullet, in order to determine caliber, we measure the diameter of the bullet to say if it's small caliber, medium caliber, or large caliber. With no scale here and no measurements, I'm not able to say what the caliber is.
And from your view, assume from all the information, the evidence is consistent with 38 or 357?
That's acceptable. Those are medium caliber bullets.
And what, when you do autopsies, do you see a lot of deaths with smaller bullets?
We do. Those bullets typically do not exit because they're smaller caliber. They don't have as much firepower to push them through the body. So they largely stay within the body, a small caliber.
Like a 22 caliber or 25 caliber or 32 caliber?
Yes, the 22s and 25s are small caliber. Anything greater than 1/4 of an inch, which is bigger than 25, is a medium caliber or a large caliber.
Now, Doctor, going on, you just looked at photographs from the morgue.
Yes.
That have been identified in this case. And as a forensic pathologist, you have been given and have reviewed, for your opinions, photographs at the crime scene.
I did, yes.
Are they important to you?
Very much so, yes.
Would you tell the jury why they're so important?
A forensic pathologist not only looks at the body and the laboratory analysis, but we also look at the scene investigation and evaluation. And we do that to help try to reconfigure what happened, what may have happened, what most likely happened during an altercation that ultimately leads to death. So in looking at the autopsy, I know what bullets went where and how close they were, but that's all fine. But when asked to see what the body looks like at the scene, now I can interpret how they went into the body and where he was when he got shot, where the shooter was when he got shot, and try and answer those questions. That's the forensic part of what I do for my career.
Therefore, I'm going to turn over to you 25. And in your own words, tell the jury why that photograph of Carl Hoerig on the floor is important, if it is.
This is State's Exhibit 20. State's Exhibit 20 shows Mr. Hoerig lying on the floor. And what's noted there is that he has a shoe that is between his right arm and his belly, his abdomen and chest area. That's what that dark area is underneath his armpit. There's also one that's closer to the steps, and a bottle of water that's also closer to the steps. What's noted in this photograph is that there is a stain on the back of his shirt. That is the body fluids that have drained from his body. The large stain is from gunshot wound A that was leaking through his shirt or onto his shirt during the post-mortem phase. And again, this essentially shows how Dr. Germanick identified when he was at the scene what the victim looked like.
25.
State's Exhibit 25 is another angle of Mr. Hoerig, and again it shows him lying pretty much on his left side. One of his shoes, or a shoe, is between his rear end and the bottom step. And again, it shows that there is the stain where the shirt, that's where the entrance wounds going through his back are where the darker discoloration of his shirts are.
And both shoes are off and there's a bottle.
Yes.
Water bottle. 26.
State's Exhibit 26 is showing essentially one of the shoes, the water bottle, and where his feet are, somewhat away from the bottom of the stairs. The feet are not up on the stairs, and generally when someone falls down the stairs, they stop, depending on how they go, with parts of the body on the steps. He did not fall down the stairs.
Okay. I want to ask you.
Object to that, Your Honor. That's an
Or
opinion.
formulate that in the manner of an opinion. Can't state the way it is. Ask it again.
You looked at the autopsy report, and do you have an opinion from looking at the body, the injuries on the body, whether or not Carl Hoerig fell 10 to 7 steps?
I have an opinion.
And I'm going to object, Your Honor. He has no experience in crime scene reconstruction. He hasn't seen the scene.
Go ahead.
My opinion is that he did not fall down the steps, and that is because he does not have any blunt trauma from a fall. So whenever a body falls downstairs, those are a series of blunt impacts. Those are going to leave bruises or scrapes, sometimes tears, which are lacerations, maybe broken bones. Those are all things that are not present in the autopsy.
And going on to Exhibit 23.
State's Exhibit 23 shows Mr. Hoerig as he's lying, and there is, as we get a little closer, there's a darker stain which is in the, this is on the shirt in the center of the back. That is gunshot wound B. The whiter area that's in the broad stain is gunshot wound A. That darker wound for B is blood. So that was a bloody wound for gunshot wound B, and it went through vital structures. What's also noted is that there's some blood that is collected on his left shirt sleeve next to the head, as well as some apparent blood that's by his right hand and on the blue carpet.
29.
State's Exhibit 29. Now Mr. Hoerig has been rolled over, and we're first seeing what his chest looks like in these images here. All that purple discoloration that's on his face and on his left arm and his chest and abdomen, that is the livor mortis. That is where the blood has pooled, it has collected while he's lying prone or on his belly for the 3 days until he was found. When he's rolled over, there's a collection of blood on the carpet that is at the lower portion of the image. That is where his left face was implanted up against that carpet, and there is part of the projectile that exited his left ear area is in that collection of blood.
The crime scene, State's Exhibit 32, please.
In State's Exhibit 32 is that pool of blood that is where his left face was in contact with the floor. The object down in the lower portion of the image is his arm. And there's a green piece of paper that's pointing to a fragment projectile. That's where the bullet that entered his right face, exited his left face, and was deposited on the carpet from gunshot C.
And that was 12 inches or 24 inches away.
When it was fired, yes.
Now, State's Exhibit 41.
State's Exhibit 41 shows where two bullets had penetrated the floor. Part of the carpet has been removed, and there are cables or string that are attached, indicating potential angles for where those bullets had traveled into the floor based on calculating the trajectory. Obviously, the body is no longer there. This happened. This image was taken sometime after the body was removed.
And you have reviewed the statement of Claudia Hoerig regarding her shooting shots upstairs?
Yes.
And you just described the two shots that are in evidence that missed the victim from the evidence?
Yes.
When victims are shot, do they generally move?
Depends on where they're shot and what the bullet does to the body. They can move, yes.
And do you have an opinion from everything that you've testified to as to the location of the deceased prior to being shot and found in the position that he was found?
Sustained. This is crime scene. Go to a different thing.
Your Honor, you don't...
Sustained. Go ahead.
Do you have an opinion as to where A entered?
I do.
Go ahead.
Gunshot wound A, that is the non-lethal wound that enters the shoulder blade area and goes up to the right shoulder. Because of the steepness of the bullet, it enters and only travels a couple of inches going forward, but not too deep. So that means that the muzzle of the gun has to be at that angle from his back going up to his shoulder, almost essentially parallel with the surface of the skin. So that's what I can tell by looking at the body and the trajectory of where the bullet went.
One. Your Honor, we are done with this witness. Thank you very much, Dr. B.
You're welcome.
Counsel approach regarding the scheduling. Ladies and gentlemen, we will take this opportunity for a luncheon break. We'll come back at 1:15. Do not discuss the case among yourselves nor with anyone else. Do not form or express an opinion. Report down to the secretary.